Durag Wisdom here, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Earth Day Y2K20.09.03. 61 days to our election. Do not forget. Do not forget. Fake Senate impeachment trial, no exoneration, no adjudication, no vindication. Repeat. Music you hear in the background is by Terence Blanchard, and this is his opus, A Tale of God's Will. He also did the music score for Malcolm X, among others. There are 61 days to our election, as I said. The most important election in our lifetime. Even more so than when we first allowed the traitor Trump to ascend into our White House. That election was important enough. But we failed to respond, and the result, terrible things have happened to us that we should never, ever forget. For those who are familiar with my broadcasts, this will serve as a kind of review. For those who don't, please take note. And again, never, never forget. We have at this writing 186,000 plus dead people to COVID-19. Remember that the turd-in-chief said that the virus would miraculously disappear? And they are predicting that we could have 200,000 dead by the middle or so of autumn. Meanwhile, the murderer in charge is a new coronavirus coordinator, a quack who is encouraging the creep to go for herd immunity, something that would lead to over 2 million more deaths in our country. Please do not forget, when you go to vote, that we have a president who is bound and determined to murder as many people in our country as possible, with the hope that most of those who die will be never Trumpers. And never forget that everything this murderous scum Trump does is to satisfy his boss, the Dark Lord himself, Putin. Never forget that we have a free country and that Putin has a hard-on for our destruction. Never forget the chaos of the Hiccup administration with its virulent hatred and extreme violence. If there is unrest in our country, it is because we nominated a hate monger to lead us. And please note, do not forget that a vaccine has to go through a series of tests to see that it is safe to use. President Penny Trump the Clown is obsessed with getting anything out before or on election day with the hope that he can steal the election that way. Never, ever use a vaccine that was not properly developed and tested. And I'm saying this to every one of you out there watching this. Whether you support me or don't, I don't want to see you dead. I would rather wait another year for a bona fide, safe vaccine than to take something that was shoved out of Trump's ass to make him look good so that it would ultimately murder me. Never forever forget that many adults in our besieged country are simply children in disguise. Children who need proper role models to guide them in the proper behavior. I've read Mary Trump's book, which paints a terrifying picture of Trump's sociopathic father and exposes his son Trump as someone who may not himself murder someone on Fifth Avenue, but he certainly is not above getting others to do his violent bidding for him. A sociopathic father has spawned, created another sociopath. You know, Trump has this big square looking head. He looks kind of like the Frankenstein's monster, the square-headed monster, except that the Frankenstein's monster had pathos. Never forget that Trump is modeling behavior that if he is reelected will give carte blanche to every white supremacist thug in our country to go out and murder us. Never forget that Trump told supporters at his campaign rallies to assault protesters, to punch them in the face. I will never forget the black man who was punched in the back of the head by one of the Trump thugs attending his rally. In another incident, a black woman was surrounded by Trump thugs who were shoving and cursing her, all sides. Well, it was on television. This was going on before we allowed Hiccup to be elected. Exactly the same time he was calling Mexicans rapists and murderers. Trump, the master of projection, is a practitioner of sexual violence. Because, after all, he can grab them by their female genitals. The result is not surprising. The projection. He's calling everybody violent. He's violent. Everything he says his opponents are for, he is for. And here's the result once again. Trump supporters are assaulting and even murdering anti-Trump protesters. A murderer like Kyle Rittenhouse is the perfect example of the kind of supporter the Trump Nazi loves. I don't need to prove this to you because you can see Trump's support for Rittenhouse arise right from the creep's sewer toilet mouth. Do not forget that President Hiccup encouraged police officers to violently assault suspects by telling them to slam the suspects' heads into the police cars before they shoved them inside. Slam those heads in there. Don't be so nice. If you're watching that report, I was mostly disturbed by the large group of many smiling police officers standing behind the creep. I can almost read their minds. The President of the United States just has given us permission to rough up suspects. See the result? They're doing it. Close to 4 years later, the result of our allowing a sociopath in our White House. More mass murders by extremists, violent, illegal militia groups brandishing guns, and in the case of Kyle Rittenhouse using an assault rifle to murder 2 BLM protesters and injuring another. And note that the 2 murdered BLM protesters were attempting to chase down Rittenhouse so he could be arrested. Both of them were white, by the way, which goes to show you that Trump extremists believe only white lives matter, especially if they hate black people or hate people of color in general. If they don't, their lives don't matter either. And by the way, more racism, more hatred, more fear, more homophobia, more xenophobia, more anti-Semitism, because we allowed this evil creep into our White House. Never forget what happened in Nazi Germany. I will never forget. I personally believe that the Nazis would not have stopped once they got rid of my Jewish tribe. I believe that they would have murdered everyone that they believed were not racially pure. I believe that in the end, they would have grown sicker and more paranoid, believing that among themselves there were racially impure people. And then they would start murdering each other until nothing human remains on our planet. I am not surprised by the naked ape behavior I am witnessing. I understand how tragically far our species is from becoming more refined. Most of us seem to be as children, just wanting to impose ourselves on others because we want their land, their money, and because we also want to have fun. Death is the only thing waiting at the end for all of us. Big, small, rich, poor. But our minds are still stuck somewhere in our childhoods because we've lost the understanding and respect for how fragile all living things really are. So I'm not surprised that we have mass murders, thugs attacking protesters, and police officers employing brutality. We have this because the person ensconced in the highest office of our land approves of it totally. Never forget, please plan your vote.